For today, I would like to invite the Member of Parliament, President's envoy for conflict settlement in Donetsk and Luhansk regions, Iryna Gerashchenko and Ionova. Member of Parliament will be talking about humanitarian situation in the Donbas region. Good afternoon, esteemed colleagues. Thank you for attention to the topic that we'll be discussing together. I would like to inform that we have just returned from ATO zone where we were at the instructions of the President of Ukraine. Ukrainian authorities have dozens of facts of violation of human rights and the facts of very complicated humanitarian situation on the territories of Donetsk and Luhansk regions, which are under terrorists. The most difficult situation is in Lugansk region, on the territories controlled by terrorists, and every day the heads of regional administration, the head of Lugansk regional administration, Gennady Moskal, receives information from the leaders of special medical institutions, from orphanages, from hospices, from just hospitals. There are people who cannot leave these facilities, and he receives information about very difficult, awful situation with supply of food products. For example, Ukrainian authorities, I would like to say the governor, Moskal, almost every day is trying to deliver some goods with people who cross checkpoints, the food products or the necessity goods, first aid goods, to help survive, to help these people who are in such special establishments to survive. The President of Ukraine had a special meeting on how to organize Ukrainian humanitarian supply, how to send it to the territories where people suffer from the lack of food products. Similar meeting was in the government, and Ukrainian authorities can supply food products and necessity goods to people who are in this difficult situation, but we still have a question, an issue of security. Starting from August, Ukrainian authorities are trying to send to these territories where the situation is the situation of crisis. We are trying to send there the cargo under the International Red Cross. The delegation arrived from the United Nations and the International Red Cross, OSCE, United Nations. They are to be involved into helping creating the humanitarian corridor that would help deliver humanitarian aid from Ukraine to the territories which are under the control of the militants, or maybe so that the heads of these institutions come from there and take this humanitarian aid there. But again, the issue of security. We want these people who are to implement that should be safe. We need to think about targeted assistance so that this aid gets to orphanages, to boarding houses, to hospices, to hospitals. How to do it so that it reaches, really, this aid reaches those who need it. It is also important for the international institutions who are concerned with the humanitarian situation in Ukraine, so that they can help create such a humanitarian mission. We see the following now. After each so-called convoy of Russian Federation, which gets and which is not from non-controlled by Ukrainian authorities territory, the humanitarian situation in these territories is not improved, but vice versa. we see that it gets deteriorated and the Ukrainian territories are shelled more. Also, there are the facts which are certify about the violation of human rights by militants. Every time when you go to ATO zone, you learn about some new facts. As you know, in summer, the Ukrainian authorities managed to evacuate orphans to the territories controlled by Ukrainian authorities. And now there are mass arrivals of teachers, directors of orphanages who are guardians of these orphans, and they request, give us these children back, because the terrorists and militants, they threaten us that they will kill us if we do not bring these children back. And that means that this tactic of blackmail continues, that the violation of human rights continues, and that is anti-humane policy of those people who keep hostage those people. The children that we are talking about, we met with their guardians, and this is about the teenagers who were by force taken to Russia, but then Ukrainian authorities managed to take them back to Donetsk region. Now the teachers of our orphanages are threatened. They say, give the children back, because otherwise we will be killing the teachers over there. The issue of humanitarian situation on the controlled by militants territories should become one of the topics of Minsk consultations, which Ukrainian authorities hope will be held by the end of this week. And the president of Ukraine will give instructions to the secretary of the National Security and Defense Council to examine the situation with humanitarian missions in the east of Ukraine, and one decision is to be made. It's clear that their movement along Ukrainian territory is to be coordinated, and it is important that Ukrainian state knows exactly that everything that is sent to the territories which are under the control of the militants is only humanitarian cargo, and that it will reach those who need assistance, that all that activity is coordinated. That is the position of the new Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, that this all should be coordinated. But at the same time, some things happening at checkpoints with humanitarian convoys, and they damage the image of Ukraine, and they do not correspond the position of the support of people who are in need. I would like to emphasize again, despite all these difficulties, Ukrainian authorities continue to supply to the territories which we do not control electricity and hot water, so that people who are there can survive through these difficult times. And before I give the floor to my colleague, I would like to say that the Ukrainian authorities thank all the volunteers, all the guys and girls who accumulate all their efforts, who gather assistance for Ukrainian army and for displaced people and for the territories which are in ATO zone. That is not just the assistance to the state, but it is also an important support for Ukrainian army. And we have just returned with Maria, together with Ukrainians, with Mandri, with Ukrainian performers, with Mandri, group. We organized some charity concerts for different military units. Also, we managed to give thanks to Levy Bereg organization, Mobilizatsiya Dobra organization, thanks to our colleagues Mikhail Gvozdyov and other MPs. Certain things like in Mariupol hospital, to the Mariupol hospital we gave the electricity generator. To the Sector M, thanks to the organization Mobilizatsiya Dobra, we gave them the first military ambulance vehicle, Reanimobile. This vehicle will be able to go to different territories and evacuate military people from there. As politicians, we again would like to thank every volunteer for what they are doing for the army, for IDPs, and for the territories in ATO zone. And today the border of Ukraine was crossed by a big convoy of Polish humanitarian aid. There are 30 trucks which will be delivered to Donetsk and Luhansk regions, and I would like to assure you, dear colleagues, journalists, that local authorities will transparently distribute this humanitarian aid and will provide all the information about what was in these trucks and where they were distributed.
Good afternoon. Let me add that on December 11th there was an informal decision meeting of friends of Ukraine EU, and I want to add that our European colleagues and in the office in the Department of Humanitarian Assistance of Euro Commission, they are very concerned that it's impossible to deliver humanitarian aid cargo to those territories which are under the control of militants. We would like to improve the dialogue, and we ask the European colleague for them to start a dialogue with Russian OSCE for Ukrainian authorities to deliver to our people humanitarian aid to the territory of Ukraine, which is unfortunately is under control of militants. I would like to say that Iryna told that spoke about Poland, Polish assistance, but there are lots of such examples because Latvia, Lithuania, the UK, there's a big humanitarian aid from Canada. Now we have cooperation, close cooperation and negotiations with Denmark, and they provided technical assistance there to Luhansk region, but now we strengthen, enhance the dialogue on medical equipment. So coming back from the Donetsk region, we spoke to local authorities and direct coordination with our European colleagues. We work with Iryna on legislation, on amendment to legislation. We need some amendments to the tax code, to some customs code related to humanitarian aid, which how to improve it to those who provide that aid and who provide charity. We work governmental organizations from Europe, and we also work with private companies and private people who help IDPs from Crimea, from Donbas, and in different regions of Ukraine. Thank you very much. Questions. How pension issue, how that influences on humanitarian situation. There was big discussions. I don't understand how that happens. If that decision, how they write in media about how it fits Ukrainian constitution and European Convention on Human Rights, because one part of doesn't get pension. Thank you for your question. You know, Ukrainian constitution guarantees to every citizen in Ukraine guarantees security. And there are 2 million of Ukrainians who, because of the country, who support separatists and terrorists. We are victims of them, and we are hostages of them. They are hostages, and that is we speak about territory which is under the control of militants and which is free. We visit 80 area every week, and during every visit, if you don't speak about controls of Slavyansk, which are in security zone, but if you go to Novedar or Debaltsevo or Shastia, you hear shelling there. And we see wounded civilians who suffer because Cossacks, terrorists, and militants shell upon them. After every humanitarian Russian humanitarian convoy, there is more shelling, and they bring not only weapons but also money, because none of them is working free of charge. So we and Russian citizens, it doesn't matter whether it's about Russian citizens or mercenaries or just Ukrainian mercenaries who are paid for killing their neighbors in the village. Those degraded people, individuals. Ukrainian government complies with its commitments to pensioners and to others on those controls that are under our control. Ukrainian government pays monthly, pays out all pensions to pensioners, even who are hostages of that regime that was organized by organized catharsis in Donbas. The issue is how to deliver that money. This briefing we dedicated to the issue that it's impossible to deliver. Since July, it's impossible to deliver through food, and I'm with Ukrainian passport. I will not go. I can go because they will arrest me or kill me. Those terrorists. Only volunteers, like guerrillas. They get penetrated to that territory. You know, even Saddam Hussein allowed Red Cross mission to his territory. And those guys who call themselves prime minister in so-called republics, unrecognized, they don't allow, since they don't allow the mission of Red Cross to the territory and other international missions. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a humanitarian crisis. That humanitarian assistance and aid Ukraine provide and other countries provide, it could reach them. That's why we continue paying out all pensions to people who are there. The issue is how to deliver. And Minsk agreements. The issue was about ceasefire, pulling back heavy weaponry, and also military guns. Guns should get out of the territory of Ukraine. And also there was such paragraphs: decentralization and elections, local elections, and then they would have more. And when Ukrainian if we can pay out all. This is a very difficult answer to your difficult question. That's why we do a lot for international dialogue, and we would like we invite others to see what's happening. Your question is correct. To 1 year event of tragic events in Ukraine, to the revolution of dignity, to annexation of Crimea, when they stole a part of Ukraine in the Parliamentary Assembly of Europe, they wanted to have a big photo exhibition of the best cameraman who are there on the territory of conflict, and they prohibited. They told that such exhibition can create tension, cause tension in such institution as the Council Parliamentary Assembly of Europe. Why? We are the member. Why are they afraid to see the truth about what's happening? Why Russian press doesn't work on those territories where Ukraine we control? In Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, because we rebuilt schools. All schools are open, except the Debaltseve and Shasty, which are under shelling, and our children are hiding in cellars. That's why this is an awful set of problems, and more than 500,000 IDPs who had to flee not from a good life of in LNR and DNR. And the government is paying them not only pensions, but also we pay them to rent an apartment. It seems like a little money, but this is a big load for Ukrainian budget. For us, for the government to implement its functions, and we need to be there. And everything starts with a security for postmen, for every daily they shell infrastructure, electricity grid. And in the Luhansk region near Shasty, there's a problem that they switch off electricity because they shell upon the power station and upon the grid. It's not deputies from the parliament who repair, and then just common man, Russian-speaking, and seven of them were killed recently. So against whom is this war? Is it against Ukrainian government or against Russian-speaking people who live in Donbas? That's why the first thing is the issue of security on that territory, the issue of Ukrainian flag and presence of Ukrainian government there. And believe me, General Moskal, who's the head of the administration, and General Kichtenko, the head of Donetsk administration, as soon as there is a Russian-Ukrainian flag, they will solve the issue of pensions and salaries.
I would like to add, when we meet with European colleagues, we also discuss this situation with them and the mechanisms of mobile communication and other, how to deliver at least some money to these people. We cannot implement it, but we study the experience, and Ukrainian authorities will do everything possible to support these people. I have one remark. There's one more thing. Yesterday at the briefing we had your colleagues from the parliament, from Samopomich, Semenchenko Semen, Igor Sobolev and Taras Pastuch, who returned from the zone. And I have a question. Is there some mechanism of transportation of humanitarian aid? What should be the mechanism of transportation? I believe I partially answered your question, and the newly appointed Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, Turchinov, also said that there should be coordination and control over the movement of humanitarian cargoes on the territory which is under the control of Ukraine, because Ukraine is interested in supplying and delivering all the cargoes there, so that volunteers and the funds which want to help those people also can help them. It is important for this assistance to be delivered to those who need it, but we do not control the situation. It should be at least, it should be taken to orphanages, to hospitals, to hospices, but there are many elderly people who just live there as well. And I also emphasize that the President will give instructions to the Secretary of the NSDC to examine the issue with those convoys. But also I would like to address the colleagues. Today we have to help unity of Ukraine. We shouldn't be making steps which could worsen the image of Ukraine, that could harm the image of Ukraine. We need to think about how to improve our image. And one more thing, there's no doubt, I believe that the former rulers of Donbas, the owners of this territory, who for 20 years have been exploiting it, have to be politically responsible or maybe even criminally responsible for support of separatism, for putting the match there which set fire to the whole territory. But these owners of Donbas, they live in Kiev and they are not afraid. I will not be using all these words that Russian propaganda uses. Those people who they were exploiting, they are hostages now, and we need to differentiate between the political component of the responsibility of people who were exploiting Donbas, this language issue, religious issue, and the people who are now in this situation. These are two different topics. We need to support those who are in a difficult situation. As to those who are guilty in that, they have to be politically and criminally responsible. Thank you. And I would like to add, talking to representatives of the countries of European Union, they're not saying that the state of Ukraine has to supply humanitarian aid there at any price. And there's the international legislation. There are rules of how this could be delivered. They understand that they need to help Ukraine to agree so that this cargoes could be delivered safely. But the silence regime is violated every day. But also I would like to remind that in the period of the peak of the conflict, once we're talking about the end of September, August, beginning of September, when the regular Russian troops entered Ukraine, we were losing 30 people, 30 military every day. Now we have some losses, we have some people wounded, but the figures are not comparable. And the women politicians who every day visit military hospitals, we can say that the hospitals were receiving the trains full of wounded people. Now in the hospitals there are fewer people wounded, and mostly these are people with diseases, not wounded people. So we need to take care of how to heat and feed our army, and we all have to press on executing Minsk agreements. So that is realistic option. We can create some fantastic scenario, but the realistic scenario is to achieve the regime of ceasefire. Thank you. Iryna was talking and was thanking volunteers who are trying to deliver something to pensioners, to children. But in fact, we saw some stories that even our military have some people who come to them and bring them food and bring them fuel and warm clothes. Our military are delivering all these things to peaceful citizens as well. Thank you. Thank you, Iryna. Thank you, Marina. And this is all for today. Thank you.